The debt remembered. The Senate Hall on Aethys Prime was the largest room ever built by any species. It stretched so wide that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Thousands of seats rose in great circles, filled with ambassadors and diplomats from every corner of the galaxy. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no bodies at all and floated as clouds of light. Every one of them had a voice, and every one of them had a vote. Elias Marin sat in the human section. It was a small section, 40 seats out of 10,000. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes, and he wore a simple dark suit, while the aliens around him dressed in glowing robes and armor made of living crystal. He did not look important. That was fine with him. Humans had never looked important in this galaxy. They had 40 star systems in a civilization that counted its worlds in the hundreds of thousands. They were the helpful ones, the builders, the fixers, the ones you called when your space station needed repairs or your communication network had a problem. Nobody feared humans. Nobody really thought about them much at all. Today, the Senate was voting on the fate of the Valith. The Valith were a small species. They looked something like very tall insects with 4 arms and wings that caught the light like stained glass. They were gentle and kind. They were traders and gardeners and poets. They had no warships. They had no weapons. And their homeworld sat on top of the richest deposit of starship fuel in the outer spiral arm. The Draythari wanted it. Warlord Korvan stood at the center of the Senate floor. He was enormous, even for a Draythari. His species looked like someone had crossed a bear with a lizard, and then covered the result in bone armor. He spoke with a deep voice that made the floor vibrate, and he smiled the way a predator smiles when it sees something small and easy to catch. The Valith system is a security concern, Korvan said. The fuel reserves cannot be left in the hands of a species that has no ability to protect them. The Dominion offers protection. We offer stability. We offer order. Everyone in the room knew what he really meant. The Draythari Dominion had 900 star systems and the largest fleet in the galaxy. When they said they wanted something, people gave it to them. That was how things worked. The Valith ambassador, a thin and trembling creature named Piral, stood at a small podium and begged. She spoke about her people's history, their culture, the children who played in the crystal forests of their homeworld. Her voice broke. Some of the delegates looked away. A few looked sad. None of them looked like they were going to help. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy chose to look the other way. The Rithon Collective abstained. The Ur Federation abstained. The Thayun Elders abstained. Nobody wanted to fight the Draythari over a small, unimportant species that had no army and no allies. Elias Marin watched all of this with a very still face. He had not spoken. He had not moved. The other ambassadors near him barely noticed he was there. But inside his chest, something very old and very heavy was turning. He was thinking about Helios 4. It had happened 646 years ago. Humanity had only been in space for 50 years. They were small and new and afraid of everything. Their colony on Helios 4 had suffered a reactor meltdown that poisoned the air. 40,000 people were trapped on the surface, slowly dying. They sent out a distress signal to anyone who would listen. The great powers of that time did not care about 40,000 humans on a world they had never heard of. Humans were not important. Humans were not useful. Humans were not worth the fuel it would cost to send a rescue fleet. But the Valith came. They were not a rescue species. They had no medical ships or emergency transports. They had merchant vessels, designed to carry spices and silk and seeds between stars. But they loaded those ships with every piece of medical equipment they could find, and they flew to Helios 4, and they pulled every single human off that dying world. It took 11 trips. They lost 11 ships to the toxic atmosphere. 300 Valith crew members died from exposure to the poison that was killing the humans. When the Valith hive mother of that time was asked why she had sent her people to die for strangers, she gave an answer that was recorded in every human history book ever written since. Because you were dying, and we could help. Elias Marin had memorized that sentence when he was 6 years old. Every human child did. It was the first thing they learned in school, before math, before reading, before anything else. They learned that once, when humanity was small and helpless, a kind and gentle species had saved them, for no reason other than that it was the right thing to do. And they learned that this was a debt that could never be forgotten. The vote was almost finished. The result was clear. The galaxy was going to let the Draathari take the Valith homeworld. Piril was weeping at her podium. Even Korvan looked almost bored. It was over. Then Elias Marin stood up. The hall was so large that most species did not notice at first. But the human ambassador walked slowly down to the Senate floor, and something about the way he moved made people turn their heads. He did not hurry. He did not shout. He walked the way a man walks when he has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally decided to set it down. He reached the central podium. He looked out at 10,000 faces, and then he pulled out a small, old piece of paper. It was real paper, made from trees, brought all the way from Earth. On it were written 300 names in careful handwriting. He began to read. Violeth crew member Sirius, ship Gentle Dawn. Violeth crew member Thune, ship Gentle Dawn. Violeth crew member Oriel, ship Morning Light. The hall went quiet. Name after name after name. 300 Violeth who had died saving humans they had never met. It took Marin almost 10 minutes to read them all. Nobody interrupted him. Nobody dared. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. He looked at the Senate. He looked at the Draathari warlord. And he spoke 6 words in a voice that was not loud, but that reached every corner of that enormous room. Humanity remembers, and humanity repays. He turned and walked out. Within 1 hour, every communication relay in the Terran corridor went dark. Every trade route closed. Every human ship returned to human space. The borders sealed. 40 star systems went completely silent. The galaxy suddenly realized it had no idea what humanity was doing. And for the first time in a very long time, that made them afraid. The quiet storm. 3 weeks passed. The Terran corridor remained dark. On the station world of Aethys Prime, the galactic news feeds ran the same story every day. What are the humans doing? Why have they gone silent? Experts from 100 species gave 100 different opinions, and none of them were right. Some said humanity was hiding. Some said they were bluffing. Some said they had simply given up and gone home. The Draathari laughed loudest of all. Warlord Korvan gave an interview to the Galactic Press Network from the bridge of his flagship, the Unbreakable Will. He sat in his command chair, which was made from the bones of a conquered enemy, and he smiled his terrible smile. The humans have 40 systems, he said. We have 900. They have a fleet of maybe 100 small ships. We have 1,200 warships. Let them hide in their little corner. When we are finished with the Valith, perhaps we will visit them next. The galaxy believed him. The Draathari were the most powerful military force anyone had ever seen. Humanity was nothing. Everyone knew that. Everyone was wrong. Inside the sealed borders of the Terran corridor, something was happening that the galaxy could not see. On every human world, in every city and station and outpost, a single message had been sent to every citizen. It came from the United Terran Government, and it carried a code that had never been used before in all of human history. The code was called the Helios Covenant. It had been written 646 years ago, in the weeks after the Valith rescue of Helios 4. The leaders of that time had gathered in a room on Earth, and they had made a promise. Not a law, not a treaty, a promise. They wrote it down in simple words and sealed it. And every human government since then had kept it, passed it down, protected it, and prepared for the day it would be needed. The promise said this: the Valith saved us when no one else would. If the day ever comes when they need us, we will be there. No matter the cost, no matter the enemy, we will repay what was given. For 600 years, every human leader had read that promise on their first day in office. Every military commander had it memorized. Every intelligence officer knew what it meant. And quietly, carefully, without anyone in the galaxy noticing, humanity had prepared. Admiral Kira Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TFS Helios, the largest warship humanity had ever built, and watched the mobilization reports come in on her screens. She was a small woman with dark skin and short hair and eyes that never seemed to blink. She had been a soldier for 30 years, and she had trained her entire career for a battle she hoped would never come. Now it was here, and she felt a strange calm settle over her like snow. "Fleet status," she said. Her second-in-command, Commander Torres, read from his display. 400 capital ships reporting ready, Admiral. 200 heavy cruisers, 150 destroyers, 80 carrier groups. All Prometheus systems are online and tested. 400 capital ships. The galaxy thought humanity had maybe 100 small patrol vessels. They had no idea. For generations, humanity had been building warships inside hollowed-out asteroids, in shipyards hidden behind gas giants, in places no one would ever think to look. They had told no one. They had simply built and waited and hoped they would never need them. But they had also done something far more clever than building ships. In a quiet office on the colony world of New Geneva, a woman named Director Lena Okafor reviewed the files on her desk and allowed herself a small, hard smile. She ran the Terran Strategic Integration Office, a department that officially helped human workers find jobs across the galaxy. In truth, it was something much more. For centuries, humans had spread across the galaxy not as conquerors, but as helpers. Human engineers had built relay stations for the Galactic Concord. Human programmers had written the code that ran the interstellar banking system. Human miners worked in the fuel depots of a dozen species. Human doctors served on alien hospitals. Human teachers taught on alien worlds. Everywhere you looked in the galaxy, there were humans doing useful, quiet, helpful work. Nobody had thought this was strange. Humans were just like that. They were helpful. They were friendly. They liked to work hard and be useful. What nobody realized was that every one of those workers, every one of those engineers and programmers and miners, had left something behind. A back door in a computer system, a maintenance override in a relay station, a hidden switch in a fuel depot. Not because they were spies, not because they were evil, because the Helios Covenant required it, because someone, somewhere, had to make sure that if the day ever came, humanity would have more than just ships. They would have the galaxy's own systems as their weapon. On a remote research station far from any inhabited world, Dr. Oren Achebe sat in his small laboratory and stared at the file that had been delivered to him by military courier. The file was sealed with a code he had never seen before. When he opened it, his hands began to shake. Inside were weapons designs, not things that any sane species would build. There were plans for gravity lens warheads that could fold space around a target and crush it. There were blueprints for signal disruptors that could shut down an entire fleet's faster-than-light drives. There were things in that file that broke the laws of physics as most species understood them. Humanity had developed all of this in secret. They had built prototypes. They had tested them in the deep black between stars, where no one could see. And then they had locked the files away, and prayed that no one would ever force them to open those files again. Oren Achebe was one of the smartest humans alive. He looked at the designs and understood what they meant. Humanity had been pretending to be small, pretending to be harmless, pretending to be nothing more than the friendly neighbors who fixed your plumbing and wrote your software. The truth was something else entirely. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for war for 600 years, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, the Drethari invasion fleet gathered at the border of Valith space. 1,200 warships, each one larger than anything humanity was supposed to have. Warlord Korvan sent a message to the Terran corridor. It was short and full of contempt. "Stay in your cage, little apes." On Valith the hive mother Selene sat in her garden of crystal flowers and wept. She was old and wise and gentle, and she had lived long enough to know what was coming for her people. She sent a message to humanity. Her voice was soft and broken. "Dear friends," she said, "we hear what you are doing. We hear the rumors of your ships and your preparations. Please, we beg you, do not do this. Do not sacrifice yourselves for us. You owe us nothing. The debt was paid long ago, simply by the fact that you remembered us. Please, stay safe. Let us face our fate." The message reached Admiral Vasquez on the bridge of the TFS Helios. She read it twice. Her officers watched her face. They saw something move behind her eyes, something deep and old and strong. She typed her reply with steady hands. "With respect, Hive Mother, you do not get to decide what we owe. 300 of your people died so that our children could live. Every human born since that day has carried the names of your dead in their heart. We are coming, and nothing in this galaxy will stop us." She sent the message and turned to her crew. Every face on that bridge was hard and ready and burning with something that most species in the galaxy had no word for. Humans called it many things: loyalty, gratitude, love, fury. It was all of these at once, and it was the most dangerous force in the universe. "Set course for Valith Admiral Vasquez said. "Maximum speed." The quiet storm began to move. The galaxy holds its breath. The borders of the Terran corridor opened on a Tuesday. The galaxy had been watching for 3 weeks, waiting, guessing, arguing about what humanity was doing behind their sealed borders. Most species expected nothing. A few patrol ships, maybe, a diplomatic protest, perhaps a sternly worded letter. What came out was a nightmare. The first reports came from a Rython trading post on the edge of human space. The station commander was an old Rython merchant named Voss, and he had been watching his sensors with bored eyes when his entire display turned white with contacts. He stared at the screen. He counted again. Then he sent an open transmission to every ship and station within range, and his voice was shaking. "This is Rython Post 11. I am reading 400 human capital ships exiting the Terran corridor. I repeat, 400 capital ships. This is not an error. There are also cruisers, destroyers, carriers. I have lost count. The formation stretches across my entire sensor range. I have never seen anything like this." The transmission was picked up by news services across the galaxy within minutes. On Aethys Prime, the Senate erupted into chaos. On 100 alien worlds, people stopped what they were doing and stared at their screens. On the bridge of the Unbreakable Will, Warlord Korvan read the report 3 times, and for the first time in his life, something cold moved through his chest. 400 capital ships. Humanity was supposed to have 100 small patrol vessels. Where had they come from? How long had the humans been building? How had nobody seen this? The fleet moved through open space in a formation that stretched for millions of kilometers. At its center was the TFS Helios, and at the front of the formation flew a single ship that carried no weapons at all. It was the TFS Memory, a communications vessel, and it broadcast one message on every frequency in every language known to the galaxy. This is Task Force Gratitude. We are en route to Valith-Ur. We mean no harm to any species that does not threaten the Valith. Stand clear. Task Force Gratitude. The name spread across the galaxy like fire. People said it in whispers. Task Force Gratitude. The humans had named their war fleet after a thank you. But the fleet was only the beginning. On the same day the ships emerged, things began to go wrong for the Dreythari. Not on the battlefield, not in space. In the quiet, invisible places where civilizations actually worked. It started with their money. The interstellar banking system was a complex network of computers and relay stations that handled every financial transaction in the galaxy. It had been designed and built by a team of engineers from 12 species, but the core code, the deep programming that made it all work, had been written by humans. Nobody had thought twice about this. Humans were good with computers. Everyone knew that. At exactly noon, Galactic Standard Time, every Drethari account in the system was frozen. Not stolen, not emptied, simply frozen. 900 star systems worth of money, military budgets, supply contracts, and fuel payments, all of it locked behind a wall of code that no Drethari programmer could break because they had never written it in the first place. Director Lena Okafor watched the reports from her office on New Geneva and checked the next item on her list. The relay stations went next. The galaxy's communication network depended on thousands of relay stations scattered across space. 14 of the largest stations in Dreythari territory had been built by human engineering teams over the past 2 centuries. Those teams had done excellent work. The stations were reliable, efficient, and beautifully designed. They also had maintenance overrides buried deep in their systems, overrides that no one had ever used until now. 14 stations went dark. Suddenly, the Dreythari Dominion could not talk to a third of its own territory. Orders could not be sent. Reports could not be received. Entire fleets were cut off from their command structure. Then the fuel depots. The Dreythari's 3 largest fuel reserves were located on mining stations that employed workers from across the galaxy, including, of course, humans. Human miners had worked in those depots for decades. They were reliable and hard-working. They also had access to the fuel processing systems. At the same moment, the relay stations went dark. All 3 depots reported critical contamination in their fuel supplies. The contamination was subtle. It would not destroy the fuel. It would simply make it unstable enough that no captain in their right mind would load it into a warship's engines. Warlord Korvan received these reports one after another, each one worse than the last. His banking frozen, his communications cut, his fuel poisoned, and the human fleet was still days away from Valith-Ur. They had not fired a single shot, and they were already tearing his empire apart from the inside. He slammed his fist into his command console, hard enough to crack the screen. "How?" he roared at his officers. "How are they doing this?" His intelligence chief, a thin Dreythari named Serac, spoke carefully. "Warlord, the humans have been working inside our systems for centuries. They built our relays. They wrote our banking code. They mined our fuel. We invited them in. We thanked them for their work. We never once considered that they might be leaving doors open behind them." "Why?" Korvan demanded. "Why would they do this? They are nothing. They are builders and workers. They have no ambition. They have no power." Serac was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "They do have something, Warlord. They have patience, and they have a very, very long memory." On Aethys Prime, the Galactic Concord Senate held an emergency session. The chamber was filled with shouting. Some species were furious at humanity. They called it a betrayal of trust. How dare the humans hide weapons in the galaxy's own systems? How dare they build a secret fleet? How dare they deceive everyone? Others were simply afraid. If humanity had been hiding all of this for 600 years, what else were they hiding? What else could they do? The species that had always treated humans as harmless helpers were now looking at each other and wondering if they had been living next to a sleeping giant the entire time. In the upper seats of the Senate, where the oldest and wisest species sat, the Thiune elders spoke. The Thiune were a slow-moving, tortoise-like species that had been in the galaxy longer than almost anyone. The elder's name was not something most species could pronounce, so everyone simply called her the Grandmother. She was 900 years old, and she had seen empires rise and fall like waves. "We always wondered," the Grandmother said, and her voice was like stone grinding against stone, "what the humans truly were. They were too helpful, too patient, too willing to do the hard work that no one else wanted to do. Some of us thought they were simply kind. Some of us thought they were weak. Now we know the truth." She paused and looked around the chamber with her ancient, heavy eyes. "They are the species that remembers, and they have been preparing for this moment since before most of you were born." The chamber fell silent. Then Ambassador Elias Marin's voice filled the hall. He was not there in person. He was broadcasting from the TFS memory, somewhere in deep space, moving toward Valith with 400 warships at his back. His face appeared on the great screen above the Senate floor, and he looked tired and sad and absolutely certain. "We did not do this for power," he said. "We did not do this for territory. We did not do this to frighten you. 600 years ago, 300 Valith died so that our children could live. Every human who has lived since then has carried that debt in their heart. Today we pay it." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder. "Any species that stands with the Valith stands with us. Any species that stands against them will learn what it means when mankind repays a favor. We do not make this threat lightly. We have spent 6 centuries praying we would never have to make it at all. But here we are." The transmission ended. The galaxy sat in silence. And then, one by one, ships began to arrive at the edges of Valith space. Not human ships, others. The Pelori, a small avian species that humanity had helped rebuild after a plague. They sent 12 frigates. The Duum, a mining species whose children had been educated in human schools for generations. They sent 20 armed transports. The Cicerai, a reptilian species that humanity had defended in a trade dispute a century ago. They sent their entire navy, all 31 ships. 7 species in total. Small species, unimportant species, species that the galaxy had overlooked and forgotten, but species that humanity had helped, quietly and without asking for anything in return. And now those species remembered, because humans had taught them something important. They had taught them that kindness was worth fighting for. Task Force gratitude grew, and the galaxy held its breath. The Battle of Valith. The Drathari invasion fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valith system, and for one brief moment, Warlord Korvan felt the old confidence return. 1,200 warships, the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. Each ship was a mountain of armor and weapons, built for one purpose and one purpose only: destruction. Then his sensors updated, and the confidence died. Task Force gratitude was waiting for them. 400 human capital ships hung in space in a wide arc around Valith, their hulls dark and angular, designed not for beauty, but for war. 200 allied vessels from the 7 smaller species filled the gaps between them. And behind the fleet, forming a vast invisible net across the entire battlefield, was something that the Drathari sensors could not identify. It was a network of small satellites, thousands of them, spread across millions of kilometers of space. They pulsed with a faint blue light that seemed to bend the stars behind them. "What is that?" Korvan demanded, pointing at the satellite network on his display. His science officer studied the readings and went pale beneath her scales. "Warlord, those satellites are generating localized gravity distortions. They are bending space itself. I have never seen technology like this. It should not be possible." It was called the Prometheus Array, and it was humanity's deepest secret. For 300 years, human scientists had studied the relationship between gravity and space, working in hidden laboratories on worlds that appeared on no map. They had learned how to bend space the way a lens bends light. They could push, they could pull, they could twist the fabric of reality itself into shapes that nature never intended. The Drathari did not know any of this. They only knew that something was wrong with the space around them, and it made the scales on the back of their necks stand up. Korvan opened a channel to the human fleet. "I will give you one chance, humans. Withdraw now, and I will let you crawl back to your little corridor. Stay, and I will destroy you." Admiral Vasquez appeared on his screen. She was sitting in her command chair on the bridge of the TFS Helios, and she looked like she had been expecting him. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. "Warlord Korvan," she said, "you are in Valet space. This space is under the protection of humanity. You have one chance to turn your fleet around and leave. If you fire a single weapon, we will respond with everything we have, and I promise you, it is more than you can imagine." Korvan cut the transmission. He had never retreated from anything in his life, and he was not going to start now. Not against the galaxy's plumbers and electricians. "All ships," he said. "Attack formation. Destroy them." 1,200 Drathari warships surged forward, and the largest battle in galactic history began. The first wave of Drathari torpedoes launched in a storm of fire and metal. Thousands of warheads streaked across the void toward the human fleet. On any normal battlefield, the sheer number would have overwhelmed any defense. But this was not a normal battlefield. The Prometheus Array activated. Space bent. The torpedoes, traveling in straight lines at enormous speed, suddenly found that the straight lines were no longer straight. The gravity lenses twisted their paths, curving them away from the human ships, sending them spinning off into empty space, or curling back toward the ships that had fired them. The Drathari watched in horror as their own weapons turned against them. 6 ships were destroyed by their own torpedoes in the first 30 seconds. Korvan roared in fury and ordered his fleet to close the distance. If their long-range weapons were useless, they would fight at close range, where Drathari ships were strongest. But the humans had planned for that too. As the Drathari fleet pushed forward, the array shifted. Space stretched in front of the advancing ships, making distances longer than they appeared. Ships that should have reached the human line in minutes found themselves flying for hours and getting nowhere. It was like running through a dream. The faster they pushed, the farther away the humans seemed to be. While the Drathari struggled against twisted space, the human fleet moved. Admiral Vasquez had studied Drathari tactics for her entire career, and she knew their weakness. They were strong and brave and ferocious, but they fought in straight lines. They advanced, they fired, they overwhelmed. They had never faced an enemy that bent the rules of reality. Human corvettes, small and fast, and crewed by pilots who had trained for this their whole lives, slipped through the gaps in the Drathari formation. They flew so close to the enemy ships that the Drathari guns could not track them without hitting their own vessels. The corvettes deployed magnetic mines on the hulls of the great warships, small devices that attached themselves like parasites, and then detonated, tearing holes in armor that was supposed to be unbreakable. The Draethari fought back with everything they had. Their ships were powerful, and their warriors were not cowards. They adapted. They grouped together. They covered each other's blind spots. The battle became a terrible, grinding thing, and human ships began to die too. The TFS Resilient took a direct hit and broke apart. The TFS Dawn's Light lost its engines and drifted, burning. The Allied ships from the Pelori and the Duum fought bravely, their small frigates darting between the giants, but they were taking losses they could not afford. Admiral Vasquez watched the battle from her command chair and made the hard choices that admirals must make. She sent ships to their deaths, knowing they would not come back. She ordered attacks that she knew would cost lives. And she felt every single loss like a knife in her chest, because she knew every captain by name, and she knew that they were all there because of a promise made 600 years ago by people who were long dead. Then Corvan did something desperate. The warlord had realized he could not win the fleet battle. The Prometheus array was too powerful, and the human tactics were too clever. So he made a decision that showed the galaxy exactly what kind of creature he truly was. He aimed a planet cracker missile at Valith Or itself, not at the fleet, not at the satellites, at the planet, at the 9 billion Valith who lived on its surface. If he could not conquer the Valith homeworld, he would destroy it. The missile launched from the belly of the unbreakable will. It was the size of a small building, and it carried enough explosive force to crack a planet's crust and turn its surface into a sea of fire. It moved fast, too fast for the Prometheus array to redirect. It was aimed straight at the heart of a world full of gentle, kind people who had never hurt anyone. On the bridge of the TFS Helios, alarm sirens screamed. Vasquez saw the missile on her display and felt her blood go cold. The array could slow it, but not stop it. No ship in the fleet was close enough to intercept. No ship except one. The TFS Promise Kept was a heavy cruiser that had been holding position near Valith as part of the inner defense ring. Its captain was a woman named Yuki Tanaka. She was 34 years old. She had a daughter back on Earth, who was 7. She had a letter in her quarters that she had written the night before, just in case. Captain Tanaka saw the missile on her screen and understood immediately what she had to do. There was no time to think, no time to be afraid. She gave one order to her crew. All hands, brace for impact. Helm, put us in that missile's path. Full speed ahead. Her first officer looked at her with wide eyes. Captain, if we— I know, Tanaka said quietly. Do it. The TFS Promise Kept surged forward. 600 crew members on that ship, and not one of them tried to stop her. Not one of them ran. They had all grown up learning the same names, singing the same songs, carrying the same debt. They knew what they were doing, and why. The heavy cruiser placed itself directly between the Planet Cracker missile and Valith Captain Tanaka opened a channel that was broadcast to every ship in the battle. Her voice was calm and clear. For the 300, she said. The missile hit the TFS Promise Kept, dead center. The ship disappeared in a flash of white light so bright that it blinded sensors across the entire battlefield. When the light faded, there was nothing left. No wreckage, no debris, just empty space where 600 humans had been alive a moment before. And below them, Valith was safe. 9 billion Valith lived because 600 humans died. The battle stopped. For 10 full seconds, not a single weapon fired. Every ship, human and Draethari and allied, hung motionless in space. The silence was total. Then Admiral Vasquez spoke, and her voice was made of iron and grief. All ships, finish this. The human fleet attacked with a fury that the galaxy would talk about for 1,000 years. They fought not like soldiers, but like something older and wilder. Drethari ships fell one after another. The Great Dominion Fleet, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, broke apart like a wave against a cliff. Warlord Corvan, alone on his flagship, refused to surrender. Admiral Vasquez hailed him one last time. "It is over, Warlord. Yield." "I am Drethari," Corvan snarled. "We do not yield." Vasquez closed her eyes for one moment. When she opened them, they were dry and hard. "Then you are the lesson." She activated the Prometheus Array's secondary function. The gravity lenses focused on the unbreakable will. Space folded around the great warship like a fist closing. The ship crumpled, compressed, crushed by the weight of bent reality itself. In 3 seconds, the largest warship in the Drethari fleet was reduced to a sphere the size of a marble, floating in the dark. The remaining Drethari ships surrendered, every single one. The Battle of Valeth was over. The news reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. The Drethari Dominion, the most feared military power in known space, had been broken. Their fleet was captured or destroyed. Their warlord was dead. Their banking systems were frozen, their communications were down, and their fuel supplies were poisoned. 900 star systems that had lived under the shadow of Drethari power suddenly found that the shadow was gone. Within a month, the Dominion began to fall apart. Without Corvan's iron hand holding it together, the old cracks spread. Generals turned on each other. Colonies declared independence. Border worlds that had been conquered generations ago rose up and threw out their Drethari governors. Within a year, the Dominion had shattered into a dozen smaller states, none of them strong enough to threaten anyone. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was gone, and it had been destroyed not by another empire, but by a species of 40 star systems that everyone had thought was harmless. The galaxy did not know what to feel. Relief and fear mixed together like oil and water. The Drethari were gone, yes, but what had replaced them? Humanity had revealed itself as something no one had expected. They had hidden a massive fleet. They had built weapons that could bend space. They had buried back doors in the galaxy's most important systems. For 600 years, they had smiled and helped and built and fixed. And the whole time, they had been carrying a secret that could shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The Galactic Concord Senate called for an emergency summit. Every species sent their most important leaders. The chamber on Aethys Prime was full to overflowing. And at the center of it all, standing alone at the podium where Warlord Corvan had once demanded the Valeth homeworld, Ambassador Elias Marin faced the galaxy. The questions came fast and angry. The Rithon ambassador demanded to know why humanity had hidden weapons in civilian infrastructure. The Ur delegate called it a betrayal of trust. A dozen species wanted to know if humanity planned to use its hidden power to build an empire of its own. Marin let them shout. He let them accuse. He stood at the podium with his hands folded and waited until the noise died down. Then he spoke, and his voice filled the great hall, the same way it had weeks ago when he had read 300 names from a piece of old paper. "You want to know why we hid what we are," he said. "I will tell you. We hid because power without reason is tyranny, and we did not want to be tyrants. We built those weapons, hoping we would never use them. We placed those overrides in your systems, not to control you, but because we needed to be ready. Ready for a day we prayed would never come." He paused and looked around the chamber. Thousands of alien faces looked back at him. Some were angry. Some were scared. Some were something else entirely. "You ask if we plan to conquer," Marin continued. "We do not. We never did. We embedded ourselves in your systems not to rule you, but because we wanted to help. That was real. Every relay station we built works perfectly. Every line of banking code we wrote is clean and honest. Every fuel depot we worked in was run with care. We helped because helping is what we do. But we also prepared because we learned something a long time ago. His voice grew quieter, and somehow that made it louder. We learned that the galaxy is not always kind to small, gentle species who have no weapons and no armies. We learned that because we were once a small, gentle species with no weapons and no armies, and we almost died, we survived because of kindness. The Valith saved us, and we swore on the graves of the 300 who died for us that we would never let kindness go unprotected again. He looked directly at the Rithan ambassador. Your relay stations will be returned to your full control. The overrides will be removed. He looked at the Ore delegate. Your banking code will be audited by an independent team. You will find that we took nothing and changed nothing. He looked at the whole Senate. Everything we built into your systems was a failsafe, a last resort. It has been used once, and we hope it will never be used again. But understand this. His eyes were steady and clear and carried the weight of 6 centuries. We remember. Every kindness shown to us is carved into our bones. We do not forget the species that helped us when we were small. And we do not forget the ones who tried to destroy what we love. If you are kind to humanity, we will move the stars for you. If you threaten the people we care about, you will learn what the Draethari learned. He stepped back from the podium. The hall was silent for a long time. Then the Thuan grandmother spoke from her high seat. Her voice was slow and heavy and old. The humans have shown us what they are, she said. They are not conquerors. They are not tyrants. They are something much more difficult to understand. They are a species that loves, and they are willing to burn the galaxy down to protect what they love. I, for one, prefer to be on their side. It was not a vote, but it might as well have been. The mood in the chamber shifted. The anger faded. Something else took its place. Not trust exactly, not yet, but something close to respect. 3 days after the summit, Admiral Kira Vasquez traveled to Valith Ur. She went alone, in a small shuttle, with no weapons and no guards. She landed in the Garden of Crystal Flowers where the Hive Mother lived, and she walked through rows of delicate, shining blossoms that chimed softly in the wind. Hive Mother Selene was waiting for her. The old Valith was smaller than Vasquez had imagined. Her wings were thin and faded with age. Her 4 hands trembled. But her eyes, large and dark and deep, were full of a warmth that made something inside the Admiral break. Selene spoke first. We watched the battle, she said. We watched your ships fight and die for us. We watched the promise kept sacrifice itself so that our world could live. Her voice shook. You saved 9 billion of my people. We saved 40,000 of yours. The debt is more than repaid, Admiral. It is repaid 1,000 times over. Please, let it be finished. Vasquez looked at her for a long moment. Then she knelt, not because the Hive Mother was a queen, but because it felt right. She took one of Selene's trembling hands in both of hers. There is no debt, Hive Mother, she said softly. There never was. There is only family. Selene made a sound that the human translators could not quite capture. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a sob. She placed her other hands on Vasquez's shoulders, and the two of them stayed like that for a while, in a garden full of singing flowers, on a world that had been saved by a promise made 600 years ago. In the months that followed, the galaxy changed, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a river changing its course. Species that had been bullied and threatened and ignored began to reach out to humanity, not as subjects to a new empire, but as friends, as partners. The Pelori signed a permanent alliance. The Duum opened their worlds to human settlers. The Sci-Ri named a holiday after the crew of the TFS Promise Kept. And across the galaxy, species large and small began to understand something that the Valith had known all along. Kindness was not weakness. Gentleness was not stupidity. And the most powerful force in the universe was not a fleet of warships or a weapon that could bend space. It was the simple, stubborn, unbreakable human habit of remembering the people who had been good to them. On Earth, in a garden built on a hill overlooking the sea, a memorial stood for the crew of the TFS Promise Kept. 600 names were carved into a wall of white stone, and below the names was a single line that Captain Yuki Tanaka had spoken in her last moment of life. For the 300. School children came to visit on a warm afternoon. They were small and noisy and full of questions. They ran their fingers over the carved names and looked out at the sea and asked their teacher, why? Why did those people die? Why did they fly their ship into a missile? Why did they give their lives for aliens on a world they had never even visited? The teacher was a young woman with kind eyes. She knelt down so she was at eye level with the children, and she smiled the way people smile when they are saying something important. Because someone helped us once, she said. A long time ago, when we were in trouble, someone came to help us, even though they did not have to. And we promised ourselves that we would never forget that. We promised that if those people ever needed us, we would be there, no matter what. A small boy with serious eyes looked at her. And we kept the promise? The teacher nodded. We kept the promise. The children were quiet for a moment. Then they turned back to the wall and read the names again, carefully, as if they were memorizing them. And perhaps they were, because that was what humans did. They carried the names of the people who had been kind to them. And they passed those names down to their children, and their children passed them down to their children. And the chain of memory and gratitude stretched on and on across the centuries, unbroken and unbreakable. Across the galaxy, civilizations had long debated what made humanity dangerous. It was not their hidden fleet. It was not their impossible weapons. It was not their clever engineers or their patient spies. It was something far simpler and far more terrifying than any of those things. Mankind never forgot a kindness, and God help you if you threatened the ones they loved.